You are listening to Movies to Watch Before You Die, episode number 12. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Movies to Watch Before You Die, a weekly podcast that breaks down the most important movies ever made that will change the way you think, change the way you feel, and hopefully change the way you live your life. I'm your host, Mark Yazika, and with me today is one of my great friends, Matt Van Wormer.
Oh, I'm great. I love that. That's great. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to this because today we are talking about Boogie Nights, a 1997 movie written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. This is his second movie right after Hard 8, also starring John C. Reilly.
Yes, that's correct. And the other stars of the film, besides the incredible John C. Reilly, are Mark Wahlberg and Burt Reynolds, who posed a pretty good comeback in this film, I think. Mm-hmm. Really brought his career back from the...
And he hated this.
Oh, he did. He didn't get along with PTA at all.
Well, aside, he doesn't like the movie. And it's like his performance is just incredible. And it's like, I don't like that one. It's like...
Yeah. Well, okay. Anyway, Matt and I are about to spoil the shit out of the film. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go see it before you listen to this episode. As always, links to rent or buy the film are in the show notes, or you could always go to your library and see it there, because that's a thing you can do. So, Matt, what are your general thoughts, general feelings on the film?
I guess from the way that I've already gone on, I love this movie. I think it's really incredible. I was just talking to you off air about it. This is one of those movies, and there aren't a ton of them, but there are certain movies, for me in particular, that if they're on TV and I see that they're on, I put them on and I can't stop watching. Like I've been up at 3 a.m. a ton of times because this movie is on, and I'm like, oh, I'll put it on until I fall asleep, and then I just don't fall asleep. It's gorgeous. It's heavy. The cinematography, very, very cool. The acting is great. The writing is great. I think I learn or get something out of it different every time I see it, or I see something new that I didn't quite see before. And I think that's one of the marks of a truly great film, is when it can do that to you. Absolutely.
And I think Paul Thomas Anderson is great at that, and all of his films are so wide in their scope that you can't possibly get everything from them that they have to offer upon one first viewing, and it takes several viewings to even come close to getting all it has to say. And some of his films I've seen, like There Will Be Blood, I've seen probably almost 5 times, and every single time it's another revelation.
Right.
It's one more layer that I've come to understand about it. Nonetheless, I think Boogie Nights is definitely a great film.
Oh.
That can't really be argued. Let's get into the major theme of the film, and one of the most obvious things that the film deals with is the pornography industry.
Right.
I can't think of another film that explores the idea of pornography any more deeply or plainly than Boogie Nights. So, off the bat, what are your general thoughts on the ethics of the creation of pornography, the way it's pervaded our society, how it's viewed in the public?
It's interesting. The movie, you said it yourself, they kind of just put it out there straightforward. And I think a part of that is because the character of Dirk Diggler is inspired by John Holmes, at least even loosely. But it's interesting because societally, I think we definitely look down on it, although that's kind of changing. Like, where it was taboo, now it's kind of very mainstream. But that also because everybody can just fucking have a camera. So literally, like, everybody's making porn, and it's becoming less and less taboo.
It's like mainstream taboo.
Yeah, and that's the thing, as long as it's normal, but we still make fun of people for having kinks, while simultaneously other people have kinks that aren't as, like, weird, and we're like, well, that's just the way they are, and what they do in private is fine. But if you don't like the person in public, and you find out they have a kink instantaneously, you're like, oh, what a sick, depraved pervert. I don't know, it's fascinating, because especially like looking in that era, and from the porn idea they're focusing on the transition from film to video. And I mean, we got VHS tapes because of porn. People might not know this, but honestly, porn has been the driving industry for new formats, because porn started putting out movies on VHS in, what was it, the 80s?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the 80s, yeah, whenever home videos would have been coming out, because now you didn't have to go to the theater to see it. And because they chose VHS rather than Betamax or anything like that, we got that. Then even, it was like 20 years ago now, when Blu-ray started coming out, and it was HD, DVD versus Blu-ray, porn went to Blu-ray, and that's why Blu-ray became the standard. And so it's interesting to think about porn is actually a very driving force in the way that we view media, even if you don't support the idea of porn. So, I mean, I want to say it's harmless, but it's not harmless. We always joke about people, with low self-esteem are the ones that end up in porn. And that is very true if you've ever watched any documentaries. And that's not to say that it's the case for everybody, but I think a broad general consensus, is that. So there's a documentary called Hot Girls Wanted, produced by Rashida Jones. It's phenomenal. I think it's still on Netflix. If it is, definitely check it out. And it follows a couple of amateur girls that get into porn. A lot of them are, either from broken homes, or one girl is from a small town and she's just looking to get out of it. But, through the world of amateur porn, it's literally like girls show up and do their thing, make a little bit of money, what they assume is a lot of money. But then once you have money and you start spending money, and then you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh shit, I don't have as much as I have or thought I had. But my point with this one was, ethically wise, there was one girl I remember in particular, and they paid her, I think it was an extra $100 for a cream pie. And then she was like, yeah, so it's cool, like I got an extra $100 to get cream pied, and then, went to the CVS and spent $60 on Plan B. So, and, I'm watching it, and I'm like, she got paid $40 to get cum in. And I'm like, that's kind of sad. Like, was $40 worth that? But that's the idea of the industry. Well, it's also, I think, creating unrealistic ideas of sex. You know what I mean? Like, when you watch a video that's like 2.5 hours long, a lot of different takes, a lot of, kind of drugs to last longer, things like that. Or, just the way that people act in porn movies, totally different, from real life or what you experience, unless you're, dating somebody very, very special and then you hold on to them, but like, it creates unrealistic expectations for relationships. It does hurt a lot of people. At the same time, I mean, ethically and morally, I don't know, what am I going to say? I'm totally against it. I've watched porn. It bores me, but I'm, from time to time, I'll watch it. So I can't say that I'm so abhorrently against it when I'll, participate in it.
Right.
It'd be hypocritical of me, and I'm not hypocritical. No, only some people are hypocritical. Not every human on this earth.
Yeah, I mean, I think to all of the sort of, I'll just categorize them as angry mothers.
Yeah.
Who view pornography as like one of the spokes on the devil's pitchfork.
Right.
People have been engaging in pornographic activity since the time cavemen found they could paint on caves.
Right. Right.
At some point, when you get down to the nitty-gritty biology, hardwirings of at least the male brain, we'll say. I don't really want to speak for females because I'm not as in tune with how they think, because I'm not a female. It's fascinating, astonishing, and really not that big of a deal when you look at how often men actually scientifically think about sex. Pornography is just a sort of another way for men to almost alleviate or experience those thoughts via a different medium. And when you argue the ethics of pornography, I think you need to first attack the way in which the pornography is created and not necessarily the way in which it's consumed. And I think the two tend to get sort of bundled up in our modern society. And yeah, you've already spoken about the sort of low self-esteem people that the industry sort of attracts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely a problem.
It is. But without low self-esteem, you're not going to have a porn industry. So it's, it's like your lifeblood. Exactly.
And so between that, I'm not necessarily sure where to draw the line. I don't want to come out right and say pornography should not exist, because to say it doesn't serve a purpose is just wrong.
Right.
That is incorrect. But at the same time, drugs also serve a purpose.
Right.
But I think there's a society in which we don't need to rely on them as heavily.
Or at all. I mean, you shouldn't rely on heroin at all.
Okay.
And that you could get into the recreational, and this movie covers that because it's the 80s, and there was coke.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of the industry is interesting. You get people like Burt Reynolds' character Jack in this movie, who he is looking to create art with it. He's looking at it from a filmmaking perspective. He wants you to be engaged. I think his films, if you want to look at them through the way that we view pornography and the unrealistic expectations that create, or I think another negative on, if you watch it all the time, you become numb You're very desensitized to it. You know,
build up a tolerance to
yeah,
it.
right. And then, you end up like Randy on that episode of South Park where he just has to look at like the kinkiest, weirdest stuff because he can't get off unless he's watching, like it was like Brazilian fart porn and, like puke video. Like, and that's an extremism. But, I think to a point that's still kind of there, where you're searching out. But like Jack is creating, in his mind, art. And he wants it to be an erotic time. He wants it to be like you're in the moment and you're not, he says it himself at one point. He's not looking for that. He's not making movies for that guy that's going to walk into the video, jerk off, finish in 5 minutes, and then walk out. He's doing it for that guy that walks into the theater, jerks off, finishes in 5 minutes, but that story is so goddamn good that he can't pull away from the screen. And then you're looking at like an art versus commerce because then Philip Baker Hall's character is looking at it more as a commodity, where he's like, listen, if I get 75 guys to pay a ticket and who cares if they go in, jerk off, finish in 5 minutes and leave, he made his, 75 times whatever a ticket price is. He's not in it for the art.
Yeah. And I think that sort of contrasts heavily with the way Dirk and Amber and Roller Girl look at sex.
Right.
Because as the people who are the porn stars, you have to be numb to what's actually happening. Because normal people are viewing sex as a sort of extreme experience in everyday life. It's not something we're engaging in daily for some maybe hours at a time.
Well, it's supposed to be special too.
Exactly.
I mean?
Right. And they treat it as just something they do. It's work. And there's the one scene after Dirk finishes his first scene with Amber and she told him to come inside her. And they're discussing how they're not going to have a cum shot now. And Dirk says, "Oh, well, I can do a close up. That's not a problem."
Right.
As if it's nothing. And sex is treated this way throughout the rest of the film. And I think even that contrasts with Jack's idea of creating art.
Right. Well, I think it coincides with it too.
There's
because whenever he does finish inside of Amber, and it's William H. Macy who's like, we could get a cutaway, and he's like, it's not going to make sense. It's going to ruin the story. So artistically, it's like any. I think what's fascinating about this movie too is, if you replace porn with regular movies, it very much so goes hand in hand. When you're talking about film versus digital, that's a very real, kind of a cinema conversation, and doing movies on the cheap versus big budget studio films,
Right.
So I think when he's coming at it from that artistic standpoint, it's also kind of that kind of stereotypical director without being too much, of like a douche. He's not like a stereotypical director.
Yeah, he seems to know what he wants, but he actually has the means to get it. It's not
right.
He's not posing as a director. He is a director.
Right, but he's also worked to that point. He's not.
Exactly.
He's not. The guy showing up halfway through
Right.
the movie that's like, I could direct porn. Whatever.
Do you think the film normalizes pornography in this regard?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the world of the film. If you want to break it down plot point wise, that is the normal world. Is you open up on that gorgeous nightclub sequence where everybody's having fun and you're getting introduced to all of these rich, right off the bat. That's why that title sequence is so brilliant, because one, it's introducing you to all of the characters, whether they're major or minor. Everybody is in there. And you're juxtaposing Dirk's poor busboy nature to Roller Girl and Jack and all of those characters who are living this glamorous life. Like right off the bat, they're presenting it to you in a normal world. Just like you take a horror movie for granted because you're in the haunted house with the knife-wielding maniac, whether that could actually happen. Absolutely, it normalizes that situation. And only that situation, because that's how it's presented to you, and that's all you can take it as when you're looking at it.
What about us watching as lay people, though? Like, obviously, you and I aren't really engaged in that sort of community. We're not, pornographers. The actions of the characters can be viewed as normal in the scope of the film, but to regular people who aren't engaged in the pornographic industry, if we were to be submerged in that world, if we were to be taken from our world and put into that one, we're just put into the world of the film. Mm-hmm. Is that normal to us then? I feel like it's still something different. It still exists at the extreme of society, and it's not something still readily approachable even to us in our modern era.
You're probably not wrong. I think I'm coming at it from a thought process, too, of if I'm a moviegoer, even if I'm not, you or me, if I'm just a normal moviegoer,
yeah,
I'm going to a movie to get immersed into that world.
Sure.
So I think I am going to take it as normal. I may not like it. Like, I may watch it and be repulsed and not enjoy. But at the same time, too, I think most people that are going to see Boogie Nights or that are watching Boogie Nights, it's not a blind watch. You know, like, I feel like you know what it's about before going in. So you already have a sense of feeling of normalcy. I knew what Boogie Nights was before seeing it, even if I didn't know everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know many people that have walked in blind. If you saw a trailer, it's about porn. So I don't know. I still don't know if I drove home your point. I guess I see it as a point of normalcy, no matter what, because you're going to be launched into that world.
Right. I guess I come from a viewpoint when I watch films is I cement myself in reality in this world, and I let the films fill that world because, you know, I'm unaware of, let's say, how pornography works in the real world, or even how it worked in the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
And I don't really submerge myself in the film, but I let the film fill those empty spaces of my understanding of the real world.
Okay.
And in that regard, I think the film most strongly makes the porn stars in the film real people.
Absolutely.
And we see that they have their flaws and they're far from perfect, but they're displayed as real people with real wants and real desires. And we can't, as viewers, write that off and just say, oh, well, they do porn anyway.
Right. But there is that kind of thought process in society. I mean, if a porn actress, you know, like Sasha Grey, when she was trying to get into acting, and maybe she still is, I have no idea what she's doing, but she was doing things like Entourage, and she did the Girlfriend Experience with Steven Soderbergh, but she's always playing that kind of a character. And maybe it's just because she's not talented as an actress and she can't play outside of that realm, or nobody wants to give her that opportunity. I mean, we do it even in normal society. We look down at reality stars and we're like, oh, well, they're reality stars. What the hell do I care about anything that they ever did? We view reality. Reality's kind of like the new porn. That's the taboo now.
That's a good analogy.
You know, like you watch somebody on, you know, Survivor. If I see somebody on Dancing with the Stars, I'm like, oh, wow, they must not be making any money anywhere else that they have to do
just
Dancing with the Stars, right?
Right.
Or, you know, anybody on The Bachelor. I'm like, God, how sad. I could be totally off base, but I think that's the public perception now. You know, that's how I see the next step of it.
To bring that point home even further, I think another good example of that in the film is the character of Buck and how he's within the industry, but he sort of wants to break away, and he has this weird obsession with stereo systems.
And country music.
And
tassels.
Yeah. And he wants to get a loan to open up his own stereo store, but he can't because of his work in pornography. But he continually tells the banker he's an actor. And that makes me, you know, question, what's the difference? What makes someone an actor versus a pornography star?
I mean, I guess you're still acting, but it's like that taboo acting. It's like looking at an action star, mainstream-wise, and thinking, well, that's all they can do. Like, let's be real. Do we think of Jason Statham as anything but an action star? And that kind of pegs him down a little bit, just like how we see comedians as being on this lower level in terms of great acting. It is so much harder to be funny. You know, you can't train comedic timing and understanding the way that jokes work. But honestly, until you see Jim Carrey do things like Eternal Sunshine and, you know, things like where they're showing more acting chops, you're like, holy cow, like Bryan Cranston. Bryan Cranston does Malcolm in the Middle, and he's Hal, and he's hilarious. He's great as it. And then, you know, he does a couple of other serious things, like he was on the X-Files for an episode, and, you know, things like that. And it's not until Breaking Bad comes along, and now all of a sudden you're like, Bryan Cranston is one of the greatest dramatic actors. He's just incredible, because not everybody can be funny and serious, and that's like being a comedian, being a scream queen, and like an action star are taboos in the main world. We consider them actors, but not really. Like, that's I love that we, like, there's so many parallels between the real film world and the porn film world. Not that that's fake, but, you know, like the mainstream versus the taboo, there's so many similarities. And I think that's what's interesting is Buck is just an actor to him. He's faking the whole thing, but that works against you even if you're not in porn, and it doesn't even have to be in the entertainment industry.
It does. And I think it's unfair because I think we're better off raising the people who can perform across the spectrum like Bryan Cranston and elevating them as simply greater actors, we'll say, because we're talking about actors, opposed to denigrating the people who have found their niche and working within that.
Right. But then, once again, the niche becomes such, like, it's almost a bad thing. And I get it. You want to do different work, and if you're constantly playing, the salami salesman because that's what you're good at doing, and everybody calls you to be the salami salesman. But I think that, are you looking to make a living, or are you looking to make art and win awards and stuff? And even art, I consider myself a filmmaker and a storyteller. I will never say that I'm an artist, but that's just my thinking, because I think there's an air of arrogance and pompous.
Yeah, that's more of a title ascribed to you than something you ascribe to yourself.
And we should build up people, but at the same time, too, I mean, human beings are human beings. We're gonna build people up that we like, and if we don't like you, we're gonna bust you down no matter what.
Yeah,
that's just the way that we are, and it's not a good thing, but it's, what am I going to do? Oh, we're so terrible. It's the way we are. I can't get upset about it. Humans have done the same thing for thousands and thousands of years. We just keep repeating, and then we're surprised every time we're like, we thought we'd learn. No, look at 3,000 years ago. Fuck 60 years ago. Look at 3,000 years ago. We're still doing it. We're always going to do that. We always want to build ourselves up and break others down because it makes us feel better. It's not right, but it's the way that we are.
I think that's pretty much the philosophy of Dirk in the film, and he states that more or less a couple of times with a couple of different phrases. So let's break down his character a bit, because he's a very interesting character, I think, to allow to drive a film. First is the fact that he has this desire to be famous. There's obvious allures to being famous. We could go on for days about why people want to be famous. But what do you think is the immediate allure to wanting to be a porn star? Because that's a niche. That's a very specific type.
He's got a huge dick. Honestly, he's got a huge dick, and he has, the first girl that he's sleeping with in the movie, and now I can't think of her name.
I don't remember.
All I can hear is his mom going, "Were you there seeing that little whore? Where'd you have fun with your whore?" I couldn't tell you her name, but I'm not going to be like, the whore character. His girlfriend, she's like, "Oh my God, you're so good. Give it to me one more time." And she's building that ego, and you get the feeling like clearly this isn't the first woman that he's had sex with. I think his drive to be a porn star is he realizes, in that opening speech, he's like, everybody's good at one thing, that one special thing. And mine just happens to be, sex. The big dick, I guess, really plays nothing into that. He's just good at sex. That has nothing to do with, the rest of it.
That makes me question, though, whether something you're born with directly coincides with something that you want to do with your life or something you should do with your life. I feel like someone could easily be born with a big dick and potentially be good at having sex with others and still have no greater interest in pursuing a career in the porn industry.
Right, absolutely, and I'm sure a lot of people do. I don't know, it's weird to talk about personal ambition, because I can't explain my own ambitions, yet I feel them naturally.
Right. It's a hard concept to make other people understand.
Right, because we
can't.
All experience
how do you...
Right, and how do you... we still don't understand how the human mind works. No. We're still trying to figure out whether or not certain ways that people are, whether they're a mental disease or, not. There's a very good chance that, 60, 70, 80, 100 years from now, things that right now in today's society we consider normal or natural, there's a good chance 100 years from now they're like, yeah, you guys were fucking stupid. That was a neurological problem, and we figured it out, and it's right here. So it's weird to describe ambition, but I think, too, her telling him that he's really good at sex, that's already building up his thought. On top of, he is a busboy. He's riding the bus. He's living at home. His parents... And his dad, I don't know where his dad is. He's in the picture, but you never meet him or see him. Yeah. And his mom kind of just treats him like shit. Oh, no, you do see the dad once at breakfast. Never mind, but I lied.
There's no interaction.
No, he's like, oh, yeah, see ya. And it's funny, too. Every time I watch the movie, it makes me laugh whenever he's at breakfast and he's got 2 jobs. And, she's like, you could have gone to school. You're fucking stupid. You're working and having fun and, all of this stuff. And it's like... That's a generational difference, too, where they were, if you go to school, that's the next best thing, because you don't have to be that day laborer and, working 3 or 4 different jobs. So I see where she's coming from. At the same time, it's not like he's doing nothing. So I think that's gonna, want to drive you to stardom too. Like, he sees the people at the club every night, and they're just having fun and drinking. And what he's doing, he's taking a bus an hour to get there, working for who knows how much money, taking a bus an hour back home, sleeping for a couple hours, getting up and going to another job. Why wouldn't that be appealing? On top of the fact that he's got a big dick, and he's been told over and over and over that he's really good at sex.
I would assume her ultimate problem is that not the fact that he has that job that's an hour away, that he's just working, he's just cleaning dishes or being a busboy or whatever. It's the fact that he chose that specific nightclub when there's ones that are closer, because he wants to be a part of that specific community.
Right.
He wants to enter into that sort of industry. And I think his mother definitely picks up on that.
Right.
And that creates a definite animosity within their relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to see your kid succeed. But
right. No one says, oh, if my kid would be a porn star, that'd be great.
No, and
no
that's
one
the thing.
says that.
Like, I've joked about that, like, as my backup career choice for years now. Like, even back to high school, I'm like, whatever. There's always porn. My mom and my grandma don't find that joke very funny. I don't know why.
I laugh every time.
It's down at like number 4 or 5 now. But it is that, like, as soon as you mention it. But I think that's only people in close, and it's because you want to see the best for somebody, and you view that as a very low kind of a career. It's like diving down to the bottom of the well, and there's a ladder, but every other, third rung is broken, so it's really hard to climb back up to the top of that well. Yeah. And who wants to see that for anybody that they love?
Yeah, arguably nobody. I think, other than the obvious factors we've stated that have driven Dirk to move into the porn industry, I think it's ultimately, again, a problem of Dirk needing to be loved or feeling as if he isn't loved. And it goes back to his own self-image issues. There's lots of mirrors in the film.
Yes.
And that's an incredibly large theme.
Which I love, by the way.
Yeah, I love the way PTA uses them to show us how Dirk is progressing and what's happening within his mind as he moves through the industry.
Right.
At the beginning of the film, we see Dirk in front of the mirror in just his underwear in his room, and he's looking sort of longingly at himself, and he's sort of fantasizing or imagining the career he can potentially have. And then at the midpoint of the film, we see him interacting with himself in the mirror again, and this is after he's gotten all coked up and the 80s have started and he can't get it up anymore, and this marks the beginning of his demise.
Right.
And then the other famous scene is the very last scene in the film, where
What's famous about that one?
There's a 13-inch dick pulled out of his pants. After he sits there, he runs through his lines, and he literally just has to psych himself up and repeatedly tell himself, I'm a star, I'm a star, I'm a star. And ultimately, I view the entire film not just as a character study or on the problems with excess or cocaine or drugs. These things are all explored through other films. It's most about what happens, I think, when a person is deprived of certain types of love and affection. And that's directly contrasted with all of the quote-unquote love that Dirk experiences throughout the film as someone who works in porn.
Right. Or it's interesting because, the only time he does feel good about himself is during that sexual gratification.
Exactly.
And if you learn that that's when you feel good, you're going to seek that out more and more.
Right.
His character is fascinating to me. See, you come at it from that angle. I've always seen it as like an ego thing.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a very egotistical person. I promise I'm not, to whoever's listening. I don't know if Mark will back me up.
He's not.
I'm not a fan of ego because Dirk could be the greatest person in the world at sex and literally be like the shittiest cook or not know how to change a tire on a car or, something that so many people just know for normal. And so I always come at ego from like, unless you're literally like the greatest at everything in the world, shut the fuck up. Because you could be very proud about those accomplishments, but I may be funny or I may be really good at things. I am so shitty at so many things that, like, I don't know, I'm just not a fan of ego. And I think watching him, they feed that ego throughout so much that is mistaken for love. Or, once he gets it in his head that he's going to be a star. Even in the opening mirror scene, which is interesting because the opening mirror scene versus the end mirror scene, he's kind of doing the same thing to himself. Like in the beginning, he's admiring himself and he's going to make that climb and he's going to put in the work and he's going to do everything. And then in the end, it's kind of that coalescence of everything. And now it's time to come back down to reality or climb back up to reality, I guess he's doing.
I think what fascinates me the most is that from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, it's almost as if nothing has changed. I mean, obviously he has grown as a character and he did go through an arc, and at the beginning of the film he was not working in porn, and at the end he is. But at his heart, at his core, he's still a flawed character and a flawed person.
Right.
And it's almost as if he's using pornography and his work within it to fill a part of him that ultimately, I guess, can't be filled by that line of work.
Right. It's also the 80s. Well, 70s into 80s. You're in a very big time of materialism.
Yeah.
And he's looking at everybody around. But once again, that's another way of trying to find love. You know, through you're trying to fill that void through things.
Yeah. And there's also a mirror above his bed.
Yes.
Which has also got a chuckle out of that.
That's a sex mirror.
An interesting quote in the film is, whenever Dirk starts doing porn, he repeatedly tells Jack and Amber that he just wants to do good. He just wants to do good. And we see a great sense of longing and how much he just wants to be accepted by these people. And I think that speaks volumes for the poor relationship he had with his parents, specifically his mother, and how much he needs these people to sort of lift him up and be there for him in ways that maybe his parents couldn't have been.
Right. I see it in a different way, too.
Yeah.
Because I can relate it back to a personal feeling. And he wants to do good because he can't see himself in any other career. That's it. And if he can't be good at the one special thing he was given at in life, then he may as well kill himself. Or, you know, like, that's extreme, but you know what
I understand.
That's that one. Like, for me, I don't think I want to do anything else but work in the film industry. Like, I don't know what else I would do. I'm not good at much of anything. And so I find myself, even with people that I've worked for 1,000 times, I'm still like, hey, what can I do? Because I'm literally looking to, like, and I stress about it too much, you know, because I know that I'm going to make a good impression, or I hope so anyway, but I can relate to him in that regard where you're like, I need to be good at this thing, because if I don't have this, I don't know what else I would have or what else I would do. And I don't know, it's fascinating. And then you add in on top of that, he does have Jack and Amber as that, you know, father and mother figure. And it's like, you want to make them happy, because he hasn't made anybody else happy in life except for the people that he's dicking.
Yeah. And it goes back to the quote. He says, everyone's giving one special thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what becomes brutally sad by the end of the film is that almost every other character has garnered another thing.
Right.
Or maybe they're moving away from porn and they've realized they can, like, Reed begins to be able to do magic, and Amber starts directing, Buck has the store, Roller Girl gets her GED, and Dirk's still doing porn. It's almost sad that in that regard, everyone's given one special thing. It seems to only apply to Dirk, and that he only has porn, and everyone else has been able to branch out in his other realms. And he tried doing the music, and
well, I think it's growing up too.
That's an aspect of it as well.
You know, like, you know, Roller Girl. I think you kind of realize it's interesting though, because they all make the same change where they realize that they're not as good with other things and that they're only good in porn. But, you know, Roller Girl gets the GED, but they're all making that change. Amber's trying to get her son back. They're doing it earlier, and Dirk takes longer to kind of grow up. You know, I mean, Amber gets into directing. You know, like, I think his change just takes longer. But to look at that one special thing, you can still be average or decent at stuff, but I think his ego keeps him from exploring other things. I mean, like we said, the music thing, he's failed. He's terrible. He's awful. But his ego has told him, and also the drugs have told him.
The drugs played a big part.
Yeah, but you know, the drugs and his ego, you know, are just feeding into each other that he is this savant. Like, he is just the tops of everything and anything that he wants to do. And I think you have to ground yourself. Like, everybody, like Roller Girl, her moment is in the limo, where she kind of makes that change, where it's like everything's are really good, but at some point, even if you're good at something, you have to kind of make a change or grow from that. I mean, he needs to have that ego deflated a little bit. When he's doing porn the second time, he's very much so back to kind of first day Dirk. Or, you know, that guy that kind of comes to the realization that he has another chance at life. He's still just going to do porn. That's how he's going to use his second chance at life. But I think that ego comes down enough. You know, he's got so inflated. And you hate to say, well, you know, people like that need busted down, but sometimes they do.
I mean, he definitely came down. His ego definitely deflated over the course of the film. I guess what's most sad for me and what I take away is that everyone else who went through the awfulness that was the 80s in the film, I guess the 80s weren't finished by the end of the film, but the first couple years of them, everyone else came out of them sort of renewed, and they had a new perspective on life. And they still had the porn industry and their porn family, but they began to branch out into other aspects of who they are and what they did. And Dirk was only able to double down on himself as a porn star. And it makes me think of the scene in the film whenever Dirk's talking to the camera in the documentary Amber made about him, where he says, I only am who I am because I was born that way. I have a gift, and I'm trying not to be selfish about it, but to use it.
Which is totally, like, he says it in such a selfish, douchey way.
And it's really ironic because he finishes the sentence with jealousy will get you nowhere, which ultimately leads to his demise.
Yeah.
And again, there was the coke, but
yeah. But
jealousy
but the coke is only, like...
It's like that was more of just a gas on the
It's
fire.
a catalyst. Yeah,
right.
It's nothing more than a catalyst. He was going to get to where he was, but the coke. But once again, so brilliant that you can relate this back to the real life film industry, or just anything. I mean, it's fascinating. That's why this movie is so good.
But that quote makes me sort of wonder. We already talked about sort of everyone having their one special thing, but branching out even more widely is whether or not we can chalk up our personal characteristics to genetics or fate, whether we can say, I am who I am because I was born that way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a fair claim that we can make, or that's something we can use, or is it maybe just an excuse?
I think it's both. There are certain characteristics about me that I don't like, but they're the way that I naturally am, and I could probably change them to a certain... But, even humans trying to break a habit, I mean, if you bite your nails, the only way that you could break it is by, like, reconditioning yourself. It's not like you just are like, you know what? Gonna stop biting my nails, no problem. You have to recondition. So I think certain things you can learn, and then there are just some ways that you are the way that you are, and it's what makes you, unique in who you are. But I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I have my own personal opinions, but most of the scientific evidence seems to point to the fact that most of who we are is determined in the womb. Mm-hmm. Most of it is genetic, and very little is determined by our environment or our conditions. You can take twins, and you can separate them at birth, and there's already been many studies that show the sort of similar ways in which twins' lives will unfold after they're born.
Right.
Which obviously suggests some connection between the fact that they're genetically identical people, but some percentage has been rounded to the fact that only 5 to 10% of your personality is ultimately sculpted by the environment you're raised in,
Interesting.
the things your parents teach you, what you're exposed to as a child. 5 to 10% of a person is still a lot.
I guess it is a lot.
It's still important.
You do become... Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with the percentages because I don't know. I'm dumb. I don't do that stuff. But I can tell you from personal experience, and you're definitely shaped from how you are, but you do have natural, the way that you are naturally. I mean, like when my mom or my dad or my grandparents will tell me stories about when I was a baby, and there are certain things that I did then that I still do now.
Right.
That
can't be accounted for any other way.
Right, absolutely. Like if I would laugh, or I was always looking at things like with wonder. I still walk down the street sometimes, like just looking at the sky. I'm like, wow, this is wonderful. You know what I mean? Like, they're absolutely. You've got natural things, and Dirk's. I don't know. It's weird to think about Dirk's like that though, because it's like. It's like he came out of the womb and he's like, all right, I'm ready to fucking fuck good. Like it's so weird to think about it, but maybe it's not the fucking. And maybe his natural is the ego, is the drive, is the constantly trying to pleasure and make other people, like there's certain things about his personality that could be, and then just those other factors kind of come in and they just make a really bad, stew.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many 3-year-olds are walking around saying, I want to fuck everything that moves.
Very few, I think.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I would hope so.
We've skirted around it, but let's dive into it a little more deeply. Talk about the value of family.
Okay.
A really interesting relationship dynamic in the film, I think, is between Dirk and Amber.
Yes.
Which is sort of a continuation of the failed relationship between Dirk and his mother. And this past viewing of the film caused me to realize an interesting parallel between Freud's sort of psychoanalytic theory, because he was sort of fascinated with dicks and
fucking
vaginas.
His mom, yeah.
Right. And then the sort of Oedipus complex.
Right.
And so for those of you who aren't aware, Oedipus was a Greek play written by Sophocles back in ancient Greek times about this guy who's fated to kill his father and have sex with his mother.
It's autobiographical.
That would add layers to the story.
Wouldn't that be fascinating? I don't think it was. Hopefully,
definitely not.
Hopefully,
true.
his ancestors don't come back and sue me for like defamation and libel.
No, I think you're good. Sophocles was definitely not writing about himself. But anyway, because of the prophecy, Oedipus's parents cast him away, and he was picked up by these other people and raised by another family. And eventually one day, once he's a grown man, he's walking down this road, and this man cuts him off, and he kills the man, and he goes on to this city, and he solves this riddle by the Sphinx, and he becomes the king because he solved the riddle. And then he marries the queen of the city and has kids with her and lives happily ever after, except he realizes one day that the woman was actually his mother that cast him away when he was a kid, and the man that he killed was his father. And thus that has been branded the Oedipus Complex by Freud.
Everyone.
Freud coined it first, but it's now readily used by everybody. And it's typically explained as men or boys who have a desire to have sex with their mothers and kill their fathers. And what really caught me off guard this time was the way in which Dirk's mother seems to almost be jealous of Dirk's sexual relationship with his girlfriend in the film. And that, I think, brings on the air of possible Jocasta complex. Jocasta was Oedipus's mother. And so a Jocasta complex is a sexual desire the mother has to have sex with her son. And I think that's arguably apparent in the mother-son relationship between Dirk and his mother. But then Dirk later moves in with Jack in the film, and Amber becomes his sort of surrogate mother. But then Amber's also Dirk's sexual partner in films, in the films they make. And then later in real life, at the 1980s New Year's party, they have sex in real life. And that's when Dirk's introduced to the coke and he gets the addiction. And I think there's a further stretch of this metaphor, I guess, in the fact that Jack also represents a sort of tacit father figure for Dirk. It's never as explicitly stated as his relationship with Amber is, but Jack sort of takes Dirk in and gives him a job and gives him a home. And the Oedipus complex is also rooted in the fact that the son is vying for the mother's attention from the father, which creates, obviously, a contention between them two. And I think this comes to fruition in the metaphor I'm using when Dirk has trouble getting hard and ends up getting into a fight with Jack.
Mm-hmm.
And a further interesting spin on the Oedipus complex that Freud had is that there's a tacit fear of castration by the father.
It hurts.
I mean, it definitely hurts.
You mean like literal castration, or like when
Literally.
I beat my dad in basketball the first time and he feels emasculated and
Literally.
castrated? Oh, like literal.
Freud was talking literal castration by the father, which is ironic because
He was
Dirk's-
castrated himself by his father. Freud's family, please don't come after me either.
I don't think anyone's going to come after you.
I hope not. I don't have any money.
Too bad. I don't think they'd want your money.
I don't have it. But yeah, no, it's weird. Like Amber and Jack also kind of live through Dirk. You know what I mean? Like Jack sees him as like that younger kind of young buck that he can take on. But it's also a tool to get what he wants. Like there's a great scene whenever the opening pool party, and he's still Eddie. He's not even Dirk Diggler at this point. And the colonel comes out, and you know he's like, "Hey, so Jack tells me you got a great big cock." And it's like as soon as he lowers the look that whoever played the colonel, that's one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie because the way his face just like. Oh my. But it's like everybody sees a way that they can live through Dirk and use him to get what they want.
Right.
And everybody uses everybody. But I think that gets such a negative connotation to use one another. But you can use somebody, like you can use people in your family and not have it be a bad thing.
It's a good usage, and it's ultimately a symbiotic relationship. Other than, like, again, back to the coke.
Yeah.
And the way in which that...
Apparently, coke ruined a lot of things. Who knew?
I think it was also just the 80s.
Yo, yeah.
Like, just the 80s sucked.
But that was so driven because of coke. I mean, you get commercialism.
Okay, so we'll just call it coke then.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you boil down the Civil War. There were a lot of factors, but we're just like slavery. Like, it doesn't matter what the other factors were at this point. The 80s, coke. Like,
okay, well, that simplifies that, I guess.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of inherent problems in the way in which we can look at the different familial relationships in the film, but I know I just posed a sort of pessimistic outlook on on Dirk's relationship with Amber and Jack, who were sort of his new support system, but I think the bigger takeaway is that family doesn't need any sort of blood relation to exist between people.
No, you don't. And it's weird because Roller Girl and Dirk don't really have that kind of a relationship. But when Dirk goes away, Amber moves right on to Roller Girl. And whenever they're just doing coke furiously in that one scene, like just going back and forth, oh, well, you know, I could use a mom, Amber. You could be my mom. Like, oh, okay, baby. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think she is constantly looking. I mean, she needs somebody to take care of. And I think Jack functions under he's not looking to build a mass empire. He wants to keep his crew and group small, but consistent. He wants to work with people that produce good work and that, kind of see things the same way that he does. So it's a weird take on a family, but like you said, you don't have to have blood.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest takeaway for me is simply that family is relative.
Yeah.
And it can mean different things to different people. It can mean different things in different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the big thing for me is that no one in the film seems to have anybody else outside of the industry.
Right.
They only have each other. Yeah, like the people in the movie are almost like an island of misfit toys. They're just, maybe they're cut from a different cloth, and they had to all leave their own families, and they have no one else simply because they're different, and that's why they're all attracted to each other and why they're attracted to porn in the first place.
Yeah, and that's the glue that holds them together. I mean, like, think about it this way. What if Jack, he's a talented porn director. What if he's shit at, mainstream filmmaking? Like, what if he was like, oh, man, I couldn't cut it there, but I could do porn, and still kind of do his artistic vision. Or he thought it was below him. Actually, that's interesting, though, because if you think about it, the type of movies that he wants to do in porn completely are counter what most of the 1970s American films were. They were doing dirty, low-budget kind of stuff that is totally opposite of Jack's philosophy.
In some regard. And in another regard, in the creation of Dirk and Reed's sort of action hero characters, there's also a great depiction and example of this incredible themes of violence and anarchy and need for control, I think, in the films. And that's even explored in the documentary that Amber makes that explores Dirk's ultimate film persona.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. I could sit and talk about a whole ton of things about this, but I think we're trying to search more for family than we are. I think, like you said, what it boils down to, family's relative. And that family doesn't make any sense to me, but it does. But I don't hate them. And I think that brings us totally full circle back to whether it's normal in that world or not. And it is. Because whether or not I'd ever be a part of that family, I see the family and I love seeing them together and that they pick each other up. Ultimately, when Dirk comes to Jack in the end and he's just crying about how he screwed up and Jack takes him back in, once again, whether because he still sees, himself in Dirk or because he truly loves him. And I think that's where the business kind of goes away. And the one thing we have not talked about at all in this, and I don't know how we haven't, because it sets up the times, it sets up the morality, the ethics, everything about the porn industry and stuff, and that's William H. Macy's character. Mm-hmm. He's got, I think it was actually Nina Hartley, but she was an actual porn star, and she's constantly just screwing other people. I don't think he doesn't have sex with her once in the movie, as far as we see, but I really doubt that they are, because otherwise I don't think he'd be that unhappy. But you're commenting on the times of the 70s, of the very open kind of swinging relationships right before AIDS and coke and everything hit in the 80s. But he doesn't have family. No one's also embracing him. He's a character that needs it, who's constantly crying out for help. Like that scene where she's banging that dude in the driveway. The cinematographer is talking to him, as the AD&S production. He's like, love to get a couple of extra lights, or I'd love to pre-rig. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. My fucking wife has an ass in her, has a cock in her ass. Which was a mistake, but it worked. It's so much funnier because he's so distraught, But no one takes him and gives him a hug. All that cinematographer had to do was dude, I'm sorry, your wife is being a whore, but nobody does. And then he ultimately ends up killing 3 people, including himself. He's almost like if nobody had come along for Dirk. Think about it. Had he not ran into Jack, had he not left the house and just went up to Jack's house and he continued to just bang different women, he might have ended up there, because one time somebody walks in while he's sleeping with somebody who's married, and Dirk could end up with that same fate. He's very much so like the wife, where he was just screwing whoever was willing, and it could have backfired on him. And it almost did a couple of times. Yeah. I think his character is almost like an alternate reality, or an alternate timeline, rather, for the entire film of what could have happened.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, this could be you. And
Right.
And it could be any of them.
Because it happens on New Year's of 1979, so it's also an omen.
It's like
very
it's foreshadowing of how awful the 80s is going to be.
Yeah, and it works on so many different story levels, you know. And I might be reading too much into it.
Well,
Like it's probably just funny that his wife is just sleeping with everybody but him, and then it's just not funny in the end.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've never thought about it until I started talking about this, the character similarities and stuff.
Right.
But, you know, that's kind of the ethics. How many times, like, I've seen, you know, either in that documentary or just things that I've watched where people are like, people that work in the porn industry are like, I have trouble having a relationship. And it's like, when you fuck people for a living, you know, you're not always going to be okay with it.
Right.
You know, like if my wife or, you know, girlfriend, if I could trick anybody into doing that, the girlfriend part, not the porn part, you know, like if they worked in a hospital 12 hours a day, you know, and I'm like, at least like, I know where they are, you know, like,
right.
if she comes home, I'm like, well, I'm really cool with you banging 15 different people today. Yeah, I think you have to be a particular type of person, or you get what happens in the movie. People in that industry stay together because they understand it.
Right.
It's like dating somebody outside of the film industry. How many friends have we had that were dating somebody outside of the film industry that are like, I can't keep up because they just don't understand that.
No,
I could be like,
to be a
and
part
it's
of it.
right, and it's hard to explain because how can I explain that literally, like, I might not work for 3 weeks and then I get a call in 3.5 weeks. It's like, hey, do you want to come to, you know, Wyoming for the next 6 months? And you're like, okay.
Yeah,
You either have to have a really good relationship or somebody who understands that lifestyle.
Right.
And I think the same is applicable for porn. You know, I mean, Dirk can't have a relationship with people outside of porn because they don't get it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, last question then. Why is Boogie Nights a movie you need to see before you die?
You got to see Boogie Nights. One, if you're not offended, because I mean it's graphic, and like let's be real, it's not for everybody.
Even if you are offended, I think you just need to watch it and
you would
get
still
over
probably
that shit.
enjoy it. But I think on top of that, you're watching this incredible rise and fall of a character that you pity, because I think ultimately you pity Dirk because he only has that one thing. But at the same time, you hate him. Like I get mad at him for the ego, and I'm like, if you didn't have that fucking ego, you wouldn't be in half of the problems. But that's what also makes him very human, and that's the thing. There are so many human moments in this movie that you forget. And the soundtrack. I mean, I could literally talk about everything in this movie. I think it's one of the greatest movies. You know, I mean, we're talking about porn and then family, and not, you know, just in like the Fast and the Furious sense where you're watching the trailer like, it's about family. You know, like an actual like kind of weird, quirky family. I don't know. It's fascinating to me to watch that kind of rise and fall, but it also historically captures the 70s, the 80s, you know, kind of in a nutshell. Like you get so many different angles and so many different things from it that you got to watch it at least once.
Yeah, I love PTA because he throws so much at you, and I already said this at the beginning, but I think it's so important in that all of his films give you they're like slice of life films, but it's the whole pie.
Yeah, well,
you know?
It's so weird that his films are so massive in scope and yet so narrow at the same time. Like we said, we don't watch... The only people outside of the porn industry that Dirk interacts with are the dudes that beat him up in the parking lot, his mom, and like the people at the club. But even then, he's mostly just talking with the people in that industry. So while you're filling this whole expansive decade and time... an industry, like you feel like you're in the entire porn industry and you're literally working with one family. It's also so narrow in scope,
right?
Like it can't be easy to do that.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how he does it.
I want to. Like I would love to know how he can do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Matt. Okay, well, I think that's it for this episode of Movies to Watch Before You Die. Thanks for coming on this week, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Talked about a lot of good shit, I think.
I hope so.
And
I hope people are still listening. If you're still listening at this point, if you didn't turn me off halfway through.
If they're not, fuck them.
You can't say that about your...
Well, they're gone.
I'd say viewership, but it's listenership.
Yeah, no one watches this. But anyway, you can check out the links in the show notes to find out where you can buy this film. Boogie Nights is a great one to come back to every now and again, just to take in all that it has to offer. And stay tuned for episode 13 of the podcast next Thursday, where we'll break down the 2006 film Children of Men and discuss a ton of themes from the importance of hope to problems with the patriarchy and the allure of the future. If you have yet to see the film, please make sure to watch it before next week. It's such a great movie. Links for this film are also in the show notes. And if you would like to support Movies to Watch Before You Die, please consider signing up for a free trial of Amazon Prime via the affiliate link in the show notes. With Amazon Prime membership, you get unlimited free 2-day shipping, access to Kindle ebooks, and most important to all of you film people out there, access to thousands of movies and TV episodes on Amazon's virtual library. You get all of that awesome stuff I just mentioned free for 30 days. And for every new sign up, Amazon tosses some money our way. It's really great for everyone involved. You got nothing to lose. Click the link in the show notes, check it out, and get started today. And finally, if you'd like to stay up to date on all things related to Movies to Watch Before You Die, be sure to join our mailing list via our website at markgazica.com. All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in yet again. We'll see you next time.